Hey, thanks for joining me. Lisa Krieger here with the Californian on Facebook Live at the facility of Caliva Labs in San Jose. It's a cannabis testing lab, and we're going to interview some of the scientists that do testing, tell you what's involved, and let you answer some questions. So ask some questions. So be thinking of questions and send them on in. We've got experts here who can talk all about potency and THC and terpenes and microbials and all the things they test for here. So if you're like a lot of folks, you probably looked at your weed and thought, like, what's in this, right? Like maybe you bought it from someone who said, it's fine, dude, trust me. And you look at it and you have no freaking idea. So weed used to be a lot like what moonshine is to alcohol. And it's like you look at it and it's completely unknown. But that's changed. That's changed a lot. And we've got some really high-end equipment like gas chromatography and mass spectroscopy that can really analyze weed with a level of precision and accuracy that we've never had before. It's bringing a tool from science into the world of cannabis, and it's a wonderful thing. It makes the product safer, it makes it more reliable, and there's a standardization that we never had before, and real accountability, because once it's tested, you really know what you're getting. And, this is something you're putting in your body, and it really matters, really, really matters. So there are a whole bunch of labs that are starting to do this, but we're thrilled to be here at Caliva because they're really known for as leaders in this field. So we're going to introduce some of the scientists here and give us a tour of what it is they're doing. So we've got Mary Rooney, who tests for potency. So this is cannabinoids, specifically THC, but others. Mary, tell me a little bit about what you're doing here, what your job is.
I test for cannabinoids, so we use an HPLC instrument here, this machine here, and that measures the content of cannabinoids in all the cannabis samples that I receive. And cannabinoids are one of the main classes of compounds that are responsible for the therapeutic effects in cannabis.
Yeah. So some examples of the cannabinoids?
THC, CBD, CBN, yeah.
And THC has the psychoactive
It's a
effects.
Psychoactive. CBD is more of the body high, used for pain and whatnot, relaxes the body.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So walk us through the process a little bit. So you've got some weed here. So,
yes, I've got some pot here.
Where did this come from?
This is from our storefront here. This is some red Congolese. That is the strain we'll be working with right now. And I'll kind of walk you through my sample prep. It'll be brief, but first we take just a little sample size here, weigh it out, and then after weighing it out, we stick it in one of these little centrifuge tubes, dissolve it in methanol. Oops. And then we take one of these disposable syringes here, draw from one of these, and then filter it out into one of our little auto sampler vials. Put it back in the tray, and this is what goes into the machine here, if you'd like to see it. Put it in the rack A, and boom. Runs through the machine. We get some results a few hours later.
So what's that machine actually looking for?
It's looking for, I guess, different. It goes through a column here. Here. So it'll inject and bring the liquid and solvent up through this column, and it measures the light spectrum of how fast each cannabinoid comes out, and then it's measured by these peaks here, and that's how we can see how much is in each strain. Yeah.
So then you actually get a printout over a report of that.
Yeah.
So any examples, like for this weed, what might you be looking at?
For Red Congo, this is really high in THC, so this tested at about like 20-23% THC, which is a pretty high amount. Some, of course, test lower, but that doesn't really matter. It kind of correlates to alcohol, whether you want to drink a 6% beer or 13% wine. You can kind of pick and choose based on that. So, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Good overview. Terrific. We'll come back to Mary at the end because we've got some other questions. So now we're moving over to terpenes. And this is Aaron. Aaron's going to give us an overview of terpenes, what they are, and how they test for them. Aaron, first tell us a little bit about what terpenes are and why they matter.
So terpenes are organic compounds that are typically made by plants in nature. And they've been used for a long time in traditional health and wellness applications such as aromatherapy and traditional Chinese medicine. Terpenes, there's over 20,000 different kinds in nature and almost 200 that are found in cannabis. And depending on which quantities you get of these terpenes, you can fine-tune the therapeutic benefits that you're looking for.
Oh, sure. Thank you. So walk us through what you do here, what your job is.
All right. So to test for terpenes, we use a gas chromatograph with a mass spectrometer detector. We take our cannabis sample and put it into one of these vials. The machine will then take one of these vials and heat the sample, causing the compounds that we're looking for to go into the gas phase. The injector will then take some of that gas and put it through the chromatograph to separate the compounds into individual peaks that we can see one at a time. And then the mass spectrometer will fire those compounds through in a way that breaks them apart so that we can see a unique fingerprint for each individual compound. And through that, we can actually quantify and measure the levels of these.
Oh, terrific. So some examples of some of the terpenes that you might get from something like this.
Yeah.
That people might be familiar with.
So the most familiar ones that people would probably be limonene, which is common, as you might guess from the name, in citrus. It is what we smell when we smell the rind of a lemon, lime, or oranges, any citrus fruit. Another very common terpene that is found in nature is pinene. We actually have that right here, a really big one. So this is pinene.
This molecular structure.
This molecular structure, yes, it's just carbon and hydrogen. And yes, plants use. So if you're ever walking in a redwood forest or in a pine forest, then this is actually what you're smelling.
So then, like Mary, you get a printout as well of the compounds?
Yes, we get a little bit more information on this because the mass spec detector is a little more intensive than the photodiode array we use on the HPLC. But we do get a similar readout with peaks and that show us where individual terpenes come out in the sample.
Thank you. So we'll come back to you. Let's talk about microorganisms. Introduce yourself and talk about what you do.
My name is Michael Bell. I'm primarily in charge for all the microbial analysis that happens here at Caliva Labs. And a microorganism is a microscopic organism or an organism that we can't see with our naked eye. It's something that exists in our environment constantly. We're always breathing in and they're always landing on our skin. But it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's, there are some good microorganisms that exist and some bad microorganisms. Plants are no different than humans. They're always going to have a residual level of microscopic organisms living on them. It's just determining which point at which level of growth that becomes a problem for the consumption of human consumption of cannabis. So I try to look at the microorganisms, what degree that they're growing at, and make a decision on if it's safe to consume the product or not.
So examples of microorganisms that we might find in the plant.
So the microorganisms that we're specifically testing for are bacteria, aerobic bacteria, and then yeasts and mold. Yeast is something that's popular in beer and bread, and it's something that it's growing in our environment constantly, just floating around in the air. Mold is very similar. The mold that you see growing on your bread in the fridge that's been there for too long, it's the same stuff that can grow on cannabis if it's not taken care of properly. And the testing I do is to make sure that we catch those growths before they start growing to a point that we can't control it.
There were recent stories, an analysis of aspergillus, as I recall, and concerns in patients with compromised immune systems.
Yes.
Is aspergillus then something you test for?
So my tests right now are based on indicator tests. I'm not looking at anything specifically. I'm looking at just the yeast and mold content that's in the cannabis. The idea is that once the you have a certain high enough microbial content, or for instance, yeast and mold, you can start assuming that, yeah, there is going to be aspergillus, there's a likely chance of aspergillus being in there. I don't specifically isolate strains. I'm not at that level yet, but the indicator tests are a good way of assuming or indicating if that is going to be a microorganism that is in your cannabis or whatever you are testing. These tests that I do, these are the yeast and mold tests.
Yeah, walk us through this a little bit.
So yeah, I'll go through the entire process. This is cannabis that I get from our cultivation. I break it down from the nug flower form into a easier to deal with ground up product like this. I put it into a solution to make it into a liquid form. I do a dilution with the solution based on which microorganisms I'm trying to test for, if it's a yeast or a bacteria or a coliform. And then I plate this solution onto these selective growth medias, which will isolate specific yeast and mold, bacteria, or coliforms. And I can figure out what the microbial content is based on these indicators.
Interesting. Stupid question, but the samples are always destroyed when you bring them in for testing here, right? Okay. So it's just a sample from a larger product. Good, thank you.
We've done, personally, I've actually done research to figure out what sampling size is viable to get a representative idea or representative microbial content of a larger sample or a larger population.
What were your conclusions? How much should people?
About 1% is what needs to be tested.
1% of the sample product. Yeah. Okay. Which is the size of?
Could be about this size. It really depends on the lot, but that's not something I'd really want to get into.
Yeah, that's okay. Thank you. Great overview. So then, do you get you have a printout as well?
No, I actually, this is a very rudimentary microbial testing. There are machines that we can use, but at this point, I actually have to hand count every single one of these colonies, and then I report the colonies that I've counted to the quality control.
So you're actually growing the colonies then in
Yes.
Petri dish. Interesting. Thank you. So let's open it up to questions a little bit, and I've got some of my own. Just curious of how you've seen the quality of cannabis change over time in all of these respects. Have you? I don't know how long Kaleva's been around. Have you seen changes in the industry?
Yeah,
Volunteers?
totally.
Talk
Yeah.
about that, Mary.
I mean, just the quality of the tree that we've been seeing in general. Yeah, basically that, and how it's turning a little bit more corporate and a little bit more
How would you?
professional.
Yeah, characterize the changes.
How would I describe it? It would be more like just more professional, I guess. It's not as lax anymore. Yeah, a little bit more serious about the guidelines of all the testing and whatnot, and all the all the regulations.
How about in terms of terpenes or THC content or microbials? Have you seen any changes at all over time?
Yeah, in the last many years, we've seen numbers of cannabinoids and terpenes have been going up, and as people have been selectively breeding strains to have higher amounts of specific compounds that they're interested in. And especially now with a lot of states going legal and a lot of more regulations coming in, as far as microbial content goes, we're hoping to see, and we are noticing with some of our samples that we have in the front, that we are seeing lower amounts of microbial contamination that's being allowed to be passed on to the customer.
Thank you. And my understanding is starting January 1st under MRCSA and then the Prop 64 adult use, that this will be required. So this will be written into law. What will that mean for your business? I assume it's a big deal.
Right. Yeah. So we're ahead of the curve on that because we have a lab space and are able to test for all of these things that we know that the regulations are going to be coming in with. So we are staying proactive and keeping track of what has already been implemented in other states and keeping our products as clean and healthy as we possibly can for the end consumer.
Thank you. So it's important for consumers to know about all these things because people vary in what their preferences are, how much THC, for instance, they are interested in, and some of the other cannabinoids. Can you address that at all? I guess, Mary. Talk about, is it like wines or alcohol where maybe you're looking for certain characteristics?
Oh, totally, yeah. So like I said before, people like to have the choice of choosing a 6% beer to like a 13% wine to like a 20% liquor, you know. Same goes for weed. If someone's looking for a little bit more low-key of a strain that isn't as much of a head high and a little bit more functional, you can go for something with a little bit more CBD instead of THC. So that's a little bit less psychoactive. Or if you're really trying to get that high, you'd smoke something like this Red Congo, which is super high in THC and is also very high in terpenes. So yeah, it just depends on how strong you want it, how you're feeling that day. You have a lot of options when it comes to that.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We have some questions coming in? Yes, we do. Hooray. Good question. Of what level of schooling and experience and education do you look for in a lab when you're hiring people? Maybe you could speak to your own academic and experience qualifications.
Sure. So I went to school at Cabrillo College for 3 years and then transferred to UC Santa Barbara, where I studied, I majored in not biochemistry, that's boo. I majored in pharmacology. And so that's an application of biochemistry applied to research, for those of you who don't know. So through that schooling, I've become familiar with a lot of biochemistry applications, and this has really been fun for me because I've been getting to learn a lot more chemistry, which has been fun. Yeah.
So you've loved science all your life?
Yeah, I always have. I've always been fascinated by science. Those were always the classes that I was most interested in and was able to keep my focus in. And I'm just thrilled that we now have this natural medicine that's starting to get some recognition, more recognition.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you. Michael, do you have a science background also?
Yeah.
What do you recommend for someone who's interested in getting into the field?
Honestly, if you're interested in the cannabis industry, try to get an internship at a company like this. I recommend getting your feet wet. But any scientific degree, biology, pharmacology, chemistry will be very, very useful because we need more laboratory technicians and trained personnel to be able to keep up with the regulations that are going to be happening in this industry. Because as you mentioned earlier, there are going to be more regulations and there are going to be more testing professionals that are going to be able to handle that kind of volume of testing.
Yeah. So it really is a growth market then,
Yes.
I hear you saying. Terrific. Excellent.
And sorry, growing up, just kind of to add to that,
Yeah.
growing up, I was like Aaron, I always wanted to study science. I had a huge passion for it. But going to school and going to college, I did not think a year ago or 2 years ago that I'd be working in a cannabis industry. I thought that was kind of, just for pot smokers and people that didn't really care about the science of it, but that's completely not the truth.
Because there's now scientific credibility and accountability built into all of this. I mean, this kind of testing is what they do in other industries also, of cosmetics and food and all of that. So there really is, it's the gold standard. Anything, Mary, you'd like to add about your background?
Honestly, I don't have much of a background, and I am very lucky to be here learning from these two brilliant men. But yeah,
You've learned on the job then.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've had a little bit of experience, not as much as them, but yeah, I'm very lucky to be here learning from them, and I've already learned a ton. So, yeah.
I have a question for Michael. What is the Emerald test? Does that?
So the Emerald test, Emerald Scientific, is a cannabis-specific scientific industry or distributor. They do a lot of testing for cannabis, and they do a lot of research into the scientific applications of doing terpene and potency testing on cannabis. They're relatively new, I believe, but yeah, the last few years, but they've been making a name for themselves, and pretty cool company.
So that's a company like this, or they're setting up the standard for testing?
They're a specific testing company. They don't do any growing or any cultivation themselves. That's actually one of the things that makes Caliva very unique, is that we, to my knowledge, we're the only company that does both growing, cultivation, and testing.
Oh, so vertically integrated, and then people can purchase here as well.
True, yeah.
Okay, so you can actually come to the facility, buy something that was grown here, buy something that was tested here, and it's all under one roof in that way. Just because people have heard of other labs, I know Steep Hill out of Berkeley is a prominent lab, and then out of Santa Cruz, SC Labs?
Yes.
Any other
SC
labs
Labs.
that, of other people in your field that you recommend as well? Or competitors?
Those are the two big ones for sure in our area, in the Bay Area. I believe Sequoia Labs is also close by.
One thing to keep in mind is that because this is such a new industry and we're all in here together, we try not to use the term competitors, even though they are other testing labs. We're all working together in this industry. You know, we're all trying to fight against regulation and give good scientific data to our collective patients in order for them to make informed knowledge based on scientifically gathered data.
Gotcha, thank you. So if someone has something that they'd like tested, can they just walk in the door and give it to you for testing? How does that work? Yeah, talk about that.
Not yet.
Someone's sitting at home and they've got this ounce of questionable reputation. What can they walk it on in and give it to you?
No, not yet. That's something we are hoping to achieve. But yeah, right now we're just doing our in-house testing and stuff that we sell at the storefront. So, but yeah, that is totally a goal of ours to have some outside stuff come in.
Great.
And
so then you also test vendors of people who sell products here.
Right. The stuff everything that comes through our storefront gets tested here.
Okay.
Yes.
So examples of where some of these other vendors are, where they?
I'm actually not completely sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I just receive the strain names.
Yeah. Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah.
A question: what is the difference in organic or inorganic organisms?
So, by definition of organic, they come from organisms.
Right.
I believe that's the case. And if I had to say an inorganic organism would be something that we made ourselves. But
Yeah, synthetic, no such thing.
I don't think there's anything like that.
So maybe they're actually asking more about compounds?
Right. So probably along the lines of natural or synthetic compounds, or like terpenes. I said earlier, are organic compounds made in nature primarily by plants, and essentially that means that they contain carbon and that they are not altered synthetically in a unnatural way.
Gotcha. Thank you. Can you only test buds, or can you test other things as well?
We test our hash, we test keef, oil, any sort of extracts. We do it all.
We hope to be testing for some edibles and figure out how to quantitate things like chocolate and brownies soon. Yeah.
So edibles are tricky because there's so much there. Talk about the challenge of that, if you could.
Right. So cooking, when we heat compounds or when we heat things up, we just add a lot of different compounds into the mix. And that can make the sample a little sticky when it runs through our machines. So we are still developing methods to clean the samples up so that we can run them with and accurately quantitate while not gumming up our machines so that we can continue to use it.
How much does it cost, do you know, to get something tested here? Any ballpark? Can't be cheap. This is high-end instrumentation.
Yeah, it's really hard to give a number. As far as material costs and our costs, maybe like $10, $15 a test, relatively cheap. But other testing facilities would cost a little bit more to send our product to them to get tested. So it's a lot reasonable and a lot cheaper for us to be doing our own testing.
Gotcha. Thank you. We have a question. Does the lab test indoor and outdoor plants? And which type of plants tend to have the higher THC content?
We do test for both. We can test any sort of flower. Usually the indoor shows higher numbers. It really depends, though, because there's some outdoor that can be just as potent, so it really just depends.
Are there any strains that tend to be higher THC content that you can?
Oh, yeah. A lot of the jacks, a lot of like Red Congo, the ones that are called more like super sativas. Those are a little bit higher in THC, GDP, cookies, ones like that, the more popular strains, yeah.
When you say jacks?
The Jack Herrera, let's see, J1, and there's a lot of other crossbreeds that come with Jack Herrera and whatnot, so, yeah.
Any other names of strains come to mind if people were looking for something higher in THC content?
You know, not off the top of my head. A lot of the times.
Oh, yeah.
OGs. We have a lot of OG growing right now. Those are testing pretty high, up in the 20s or above. So, yeah, that's been a pretty potent one.
OG Kush.
Yeah, OG Kush, Cherry OG, Alien OG, all that. SFV,
Wow.
OG,
Okay.
yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Question: do you test topicals as well as edibles?
So that's along the same lines as the edibles right now, where require a little bit more cleanup in the sample prep, and that's something that we're still working on right now. Right now, we're very confident testing cannabis flowers, hash, and oils.
Another question: which kind of strains? I should have followed up. Have the higher CBD content?
We have another
So,
one. Huh?
Start from the beginning, if you could. Strains with the highest CBD content.
The highest CBD. We have one in house right now called Charlotte's Web. That's a great one. There's one called Remedy, I believe, and then there was one called Center. I think there's the only three I can think of off the top of my head right now. But yeah.
Anyone else have any contributions to that?
Yeah, I have one more that we have up front right now that we just recently got in. We have a CDC up front right now also. Yes.
So something can have higher CBD and THC, right? It's not mutually exclusive. Great. Thank you. I'm trying to think of any other questions. We've got one other question coming. Give you all a few more minutes to think of any other questions before we wrap up. Maybe this is for Aaron. Do the nutrients in the fertilizer used to grow a plant increase the CBD or THC content? Really good question. Is it specific to the genetics, or can you actually influence it based on the fertilizers?
Yeah, so environment is an extremely important factor in plant health, and using fertilizers and nutrients correctly will certainly increase the plant's health and ability to produce major cannabinoids and terpenes. So using more nutrients isn't necessarily better, but using the right amount of nutrients for your environment to keep the plant in a healthy state is going to be what allows the plant to produce the most cannabinoids and terpenes that it can.
So not necessarily more is better then.
Right. More is
Where should someone go to learn more about that?
I'm not as versed on the nutrient side of things. I'm mostly on the analytical testing side. But there's a lot of good material out there, like just some of the big ones, like the Grower's Bible. There you can also find books by Ed Rosenthal or George Cervantes that will detail the whole cultivation process and give some really good information on how to make good cannabis.
Excellent. Thank you. Question for Michael: if someone would like to keep their plant as fungus-free and, microbial levels as low as possible, any recommendations you have? This speaks to cultivation then.
Yeah. So one of the benefits of being vertically integrated is that we do get to work hand in hand with cultivation. So whenever they suspect that a product or a cannabis that's growing in a specific room may be high at a certain point during its grow operation, not necessarily at the end, they can give it to me and I can go ahead and test it and give them this is what the microbial content is at this point, so they can do things to try to fix the problem. One of the things that they do often is increase airflow, because if there's not enough airflow, the microbial organisms like to sustain in an environment like that. Also, moisture content. You don't want the moisture content in whatever you're growing to be too high, otherwise that will encourage more microorganisms to start growing. So the two things that I would say is airflow and moisture content elimination.
And it's a plant, it's a living thing, so you can't ever get to zero necessarily. And your earlier point was that that might not even be optimal, that it's fine to have.
There are some beneficial microorganisms that we do want on the cannabis plant that are going to inhibit or promote growth or inhibit the growth of other dangerous pathogenic microorganisms.
Thank you. A question about terpenes, whether too many terpenes give you a bad experience, and what accounts for the paranoia that's a problem for people?
We really can't say what specifically compound-wise accounts for the paranoia in certain people. It's just every body is different, and everybody will have its own unique reaction to particular strains. one strain might make one person feel energetic, where it might make another person feel relaxed or sleepy. Terpenes typically are what modulate the effect of THC. So a good analogy is that THC is the size of your experience, and then the terpenes are modulated to be different ways, particularly like energetic or relaxing, or if you're just trying to sleep. Right. And
speak to the difference between sativa and indica, if you could, with respect to those characteristics.
Sure. Yeah. So we're still in the industry trying to figure this out, or get a better description of it. But typically, in indica strains, we see higher levels of myrcene, which is a cannabinoid that is found in, or not a cannabinoid, it's a terpene that's found in a natural food in high levels as in mangoes. So myrcene will actually allow cannabinoids like THC to cross into the brain more effectively, and that then you'll feel the effect of THC faster and stronger. So, but then it gets complicated because there are also sativa strains that are higher in myrcene than some indica strains. So that's where we start to get a little confused and wonder exactly what sort of interactions are playing in these terpene profiles that provide these experiences for people.
So it would help if it was rescheduled to do some of the research that's needed under the DEA to arrive at real answers for some of those questions.
Yes, definitely. That the Schedule 1 of these substances has really held back research, and it's really exciting now that we're starting to get to a point where a lot more research is being done on these compounds.
Beautiful. Thank you. I think we have time for one or two other questions. No, terpenes in foods can affect your high. That's interesting. So terpenes in foods can affect your high. Can it make you higher? Oh, yeah. Such as mangoes.
Exactly. So eating a mango before consuming cannabis will actually, like I said, help the THC and other cannabinoids enter your brain. So if, say, 20 minutes before consuming cannabis you were to eat mangoes, then you would already have levels of myrcene inside of your blood, and then when you consume the cannabis, it will have more of the effect that myrcene provides. Yeah.
Thank you. Last question. What is your favorite Caliva product? Mary, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'd have to say it was a strain from our last harvest, Bubba Kush. That one was a great strain in general as flower, and then even when we made it into hash, it yielded very well and was very potent. So that one was a really yummy and potent one. I think that was my favorite by far.
And tell us the name once more.
Bubba Kush.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And it's still on our shelves. So.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, Aaron.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to second that and add that Nelson has also made some very fine ice water hash with the Bubba Kush. Some ice water hash that he has made with the Bubba Kush. So
his name is
Nelson, yeah, and he's our extraction specialist right now. He's been making ice water hash and rosin for us that we have up front for sale.
Oh, no idea. Yeah. Michael, what do you think?
I'm going to have to go with the Caliva concentrates that we have, our rosin, specifically the flower rosin, which is a relatively new product to Caliva. This is our, I think, first month that we're selling flower rosin, which is instead of rosin being pressed from hash and an oil, we take flower directly and then press it into flower rosin. So it's a little bit fresher and preserves a lot more of the terpene profile, and it's extremely, extremely flavorful if you have any dabbers out there.
Thanks to everyone, and thanks to Caliva Labs for welcoming us in and offering these great explanations. I recommend going to their website. It's lovely. Many thanks to Mary, Aaron, and Michael for your time here. Any questions we didn't get to that come to later, I can actually send them here or try and answer them myself. Thank you very much, and go to our website, Californian, for news stories that are posted every day about cannabis in California.